Welcome back. In this lesson, I'm going to introduce you to the basic layout of Dreamweaver. Now, in this video, I'm using CS4. However, if you're using CS5 and 6, it's going to be very similar, and the things I will be talking about will be pretty much the same. And I will try to explain the differences the best I can, but the concepts are exactly the same. Now, I'm just going to explain Dreamweaver in general. A lot of people think of Dreamweaver as a program that's going to create its own files just like Photoshop would. Like with Photoshop, you have PSDs, Illustrator, you have AI files, Dreamweaver, you have INDD files. Dreamweaver doesn't actually use any of its own files. What it's doing is it's allowing you an easier way to manipulate code and image files. For example, if you have an HTML or a CSS or PHP file, Dreamweaver is going to do its best to make the handling and manipulation of those files a little bit easier than if you were just using a straight code editor. Now, I consider Dreamweaver basically a fancy code editor. I don't really use a lot of its tools that are on the design end. I mostly use it to help speed up my coding process as well as uploading files to my server and keeping my files nice and organized. There are a lot of really helpful, handy tools that'll speed up the process, but in general, I think of it as a code editor. So I hope that you'll think of it that way as well, and I will show you the very basics of Dreamweaver. So most likely when you start up, you're going to get some sort of welcome screen, and there's going to be three main columns. One's going to be recent files, the other is going to be some common file types that you'll use, and the other are some top features. I'm just going to stick mainly to this middle column here. And I'll just start off by showing you HTML. So as you'll see, it opened it up here, and all we can see right now is just a bunch of code. And that's because in the top left, there are three different modes. We have code, split, and design. When we're on the code mode, as the name suggests, all you'll see is code. If we go to split, it's actually going to split us between the code and the design view. And you'll notice mine split horizontally. Some people's will have it split vertically. And the way that you change that is under View and choose Split Vertically. And I actually think this is a little bit better. And basically what happens is whatever code is in here is going to be rendered out and reflected over here as it would appear on a web browser. However, Dreamweaver isn't always the most accurate in terms of how it presents those renderings. A lot of times you'll be working in Dreamweaver and it'll look a certain way here, but then when you go to preview it in Firefox or Chrome, it's going to look completely different. So you can't really trust the design view here completely. The other thing about Dreamweaver's design view is it's meant to allow you to kind of manipulate your content by dragging it around and resizing it and stuff over here, and it's going to do all the coding work for you. However, in my own experience, Dreamweaver tends to do a bad job of manipulating the code, and I end up getting all kinds of problems, and before I really knew what I was doing code-wise, I would get really frustrated because I couldn't get it to do what I wanted it to or what it was supposed to. And once I learned code, I would see how it was manipulating that code over here, and I would see that it was often doing things not in the best way. So that's why I primarily stick to the code side and just use this as a reference. Now, prior to watching this video, I have a couple other lessons on HTML and CSS, and those are done using an online code editor called jsbin.com. Now this is a free online program that allows you to edit code, and it will show you how it looks over here on the output view, and they have it broken up into the different code languages. We have HTML, We can turn on CSS by clicking there, and it's going to open up the CSS code language here. And if we could here, it's going to show the JavaScript. And then the output is what all those coding languages together will spit out visually. So if I turn all of these off, we just have the end product. And they have some JavaScript here so that when I click on it, it's going to spin this guy around and little messages appear here, and we have links and highlightable text. There's all sorts of things going on here code-wise. But you can start with a blank slate just by going in and deleting all that code. And you can just start coding from scratch. But for the purposes of this lesson, I'll be introducing you to Dreamweaver. So first of all, I'm going to go into the preferences and make a couple of changes which are not set by default. So in Mac, you're going to go to the Dreamweaver menu and do preferences. It might be under the file menu, perhaps in Windows, or you can hit Command or Control U to get there. All right, in the category section, we're going to go to, let's see, fonts, and code view. The font family and the size here is what causes this to appear the way that it does. And I find it to be a bit too small and hard to read. So I choose one of my personal favorites, which is Century Gothic. And I set the size way bigger to like 16 and hit OK. And I find this type is really easy to read, nice and big. If you're using Windows, you might not have Century Gothic, so perhaps maybe Arial or Helvetica would be a little bit better. So that's the first change we want to make. Second change is code hints. Now this is how we write out tags. Now if you watched the previous lesson on writing HTML, everything is in tags. And Dreamweaver will actually help speed up the process of writing out your tags by auto-completing your formatting. So right now by default, we have this option, and it's after typing this // And I'll just demonstrate what that does real quick. So inside the body, I'm going to type a paragraph tag. So I'm going to type this, P. Okay, I've typed the opening tag. This is a paragraph. And now I'm going to type the closing tag. So I'm going to type // and it auto completes the rest of the tag. Now that's great and all, but there's actually a faster, more efficient way of doing that, and I think it's this second option. So with this one, after I type my opening tag, so as soon as I type this greater than, it throws in the closing tag. Now I think this is much better because that way I'm not going to forget to close my tags later on. It's already done it for me, and usually I end up typing the opening and closing together anyways, for the very reason that I do tend to forget to close things. So that is a really cool, fast way to do that. So one other thing we can do is, in Dreamweaver, if you want to wrap something in a particular tag, so for example, right now this is inside of a paragraph tag. If I want to wrap this inside of a header tag, or maybe I'll type a header here. I want this to be a header. I'm going to highlight it and then press Command or Control T for Windows, and then I type the name of the tag. So H1, and then hit Enter. Might have to hit it twice, and it will wrap it in that tag. So that makes things really easy. Some other hotkeys are, if I want to make this text right here bold, I just highlight it and then press Command B, and it will automatically wrap it in this strong tag. There's other helpful things, like if I want to make something a link, I will highlight whatever I want to be a link, and they have over here an insert panel. Now if you don't see that, it's going to be under Window and then Insert right here. If I want this to be a link, I can click Hyperlink, and it will give me these hyperlink options. So this is the actual text that appears in the link, and then I type where I want people to go when they click on it. So I'm going to type http://google.com. The target is how it opens the link. So if it's _blank, it'll open it in a new tab or a new window. If we're using frames, which we're not really in this case, you'll use parent. It will open up the frame above the frame you're currently in. And if you click self, if your link happens to be inside of an iframe, it'll only change that iframe. And then top will be if you have a frame inside of a frame inside of a frame, it'll open up the very top frame. But again, that's only if we're using frames, so we don't have to worry about that. So I'm just going to choose _blank. Title is what's going to appear when I put my mouse over the link and a little helpful hint comes up. So I'm just going to say links to Google. That's about it. So I'm going to hit OK. And it automatically generates this code right here. So the href is where it links to, title is the text that shows up, and target where it opens up. And then there's the actual link text. Now, if I want to get some, if I want to be able to edit this without having to mess with the code, down here we have our properties panel, and oftentimes I wish it would just refresh on its own, but you have to refresh it to bring up all the options that are contextual to whatever you have selected. So right now I have my link selected. Down here it's filled in the blank, the link blank with the URL. It's filled in the title with the title I gave it and filled in the target. So if I want to change the target to parent, I'll just change it down here and it updates my code up here. If I want to change this to Yahoo, change it here, press tab or something, and it updates my code. Okay, so that's pretty helpful. If I want to do an unordered list, I can do that by, let's see, is it over here? Actually, it's down here. So let's say I'm going to say my favorite bands. And I'm going to start my first one by saying the Strokes, then the Gorillaz, and Portishead. So I'm going to select these, click refresh again because it's lazy, it doesn't refresh, and I can either do an unordered list, and actually that didn't do quite what I wanted. I may have to space these out over here. Okay, select these. There we go. So what it did is it wrapped the whole thing in an unordered list and created list items for each one of those things. Now you'll notice also, if I hit return over here, this is a paragraph. Hit return again, this is another paragraph. Over here in the code side, whenever I hit return, it's generating a unique paragraph for each one and wrapping it in those tags automatically. Now let's say I just want to go down one line and I don't want this whole space here. In this case, I'm going to hold shift and press return. Say this is the next line. And it puts a line break right here, or the BR tag. And that just gets it to go down one line. Now you'll notice these are both still inside of the paragraph tag. So yeah, just take note of that. Now a line break or a BR tag is actually self-closing. So whereas a paragraph, you have an opening and a closing that these are inside of, the line break just stands on its own. It doesn't need an opening and a closing. And to help us indicate this visually, we have a space and a slash. So you notice with the closing tags, it's slash and then the name of the tag. Here, it's the name of the tag and then a slash. Now we don't really even need that right there. That's just there to indicate that it's self-closing. All right, another way we can bold things is highlight it, and we have this bold button here. That will do that, wraps it in the strong tag. If I want to make something italic, I can highlight it and I can either press Command I, that will wrap it in an EM tag, or, excuse me, okay, I can press the I down here. All right, now Dreamweaver makes it really easy to drop images into your layout. So if I want to do that, the hotkey in Mac is Command Option I. In Windows, it'll be Control Alt I. And it's going to take a couple seconds, but it's going to bring up this little navigation window, and it's going to ask me to find some sort of image to drop in there. So I'm going to go through and try to find an image. Here's one. Now this image is going to be way too big, but I'm going to hit OK. And what it's doing is I haven't set up a site yet, so it's giving me all kinds of problems. I'm not going to worry about that at this point. This is just to demonstrate. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and create one because it's asking me to. So in this case, I'm going to pick a folder where I'm going to have all of my site files saved under. So in this case, I'm going to save it into this folder called Intro to Dreamweaver. So I'm going to save, hit OK. It's still giving me problems. Under the root. Okay, okay. Since it's giving so many problems, well, it went ahead and did it. So it dropped my image in here, but it's obviously way too big. So Dreamweaver gives me a way to scale this down. So I can go to the bottom right and just drag upward. And if I hold Shift, it's going to scale it proportionally. So I'm going to keep scaling it. Now, one word of warning is, even though it looks really small, when I post this up on the web, you generally want to resave your images scaled down, because even though this is resized here, it's only doing that through the code. But if I were to go to this page online, it's actually going to be downloading this really big image file and just scaling it down on this site. So generally you want to resize images, but I'm just doing this for the purposes of showing you how to do this. So when I click on this image, I have all kinds of options down here. I can give it an ID. If I want to make certain parts of the image clickable, I can create an image map, and I'll just do that real quick. So I'm going to use this rectangle tool. And if I just want this part of the image to be clickable, I'm going to click and drag a rectangle here. It says, please describe it with an alt field. So I'll say OK. I'm going to say clickable down here. And then it's asking me where I want to link to. I'll have that link to google.com. And in a blank tab. So I went in and created a map tag, and this is kind of a whole nother subject matter, but this is basically a quick way to make certain parts of an image linkable. So that moves us on to the next phase, which is previewing this on the web. Now, Dreamweaver has a quick way to do that. They have this little globe icon. You can click on that, and you can choose which browser you want to use. So I am going to choose Safari, and it asks, do I want to save it? Yes, I do. So I'm going to save. You want to pick a spot to save that at. I'm just going to call this index.html. Hit save. And it says it uses this file that's not on the site. I'm going to go ahead and copy it. So now it's opening up Dreamweaver. and I will see how this site really looks on the web. So here's my stuff, here's my link, and then down here you'll notice cursor is just a regular pointer, but as soon as I go to that one area, it turns into a pointer. When I click on that, it's going to open up Google in a new tab. So that is a pretty cool feature. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, which I probably should have done earlier, is set up a site. And what that basically is for is if I'm working on tons of different sites, which as a web designer I am, I'll usually have 20 or 30 or 40 different sites that I need to switch between. And every single one of those is on a different location on my hard drive, has different files associated with it. I'm uploading it usually to a different server, so all sorts of unique information for each one. If I have to close and open all those different files individually and have to relocate every single site every time, it's going to get really irritating. So Dreamweaver kind of saves us a lot of time and energy by creating sites. And that's going to be in this bottom right corner here. Right now I have a site called Engage open, which I was tweaking with, but I want to go to Manage Sites. And this is going to list all my sites. Now, I set up a special user for videos, for creating these videos, so I don't really have any sites in here, but on my other account, I'll have like 30 different sites. So what I want to do is create a new site and just choose Site. And yours might look a little different, but the main thing it'll be asking you is the name of the site and the location of the site. So no matter what version you're using, those are the options you'll see. So I'm just going to call this tutorial. And it's going to ask me where I want to save this site at. So I'm going to click the folder, and I have to navigate through my computer to find where that's at. So I was recently here, so Intro to Dreamweaver. I'm going to actually create a new folder, call it Code. You can call it whatever you want, but I just want an extra level of organization here. So I'm going to choose Code, and that's it. Hit OK. And now I have it under my Managed Sites list. I have that highlighted, so I'm going to click Done. And now it says Tutorial, and it should show me all of my associated files, but I actually don't have any in that folder I just created. So I actually need to go in and save this again in this folder. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, save it under this Code folder. You'll notice here's the first version I created as well as that image I was pulling. So I'm going to save in this folder. And it's going to say, do I want to update links? Now what this means is if you ever change the location of any file, all of these links are all connected. So for example, right here, this is the image tag for pulling in this image. And it's looking for a certain place relative to this HTML file I'm working on. So let me just quickly show you. So here is that code file. And there's the image. So, and here's the image on its own. Now in relation to each other, they're both in the same folder. So I don't have to type a file path here. So like I don't have to type the name of a folder that it's inside of and then a slash. I just type the name of that file .jpg. Now if I were to move either one of these, if I were to move that image to another folder or change the HTML page, they're now in relation to each other going to be different, and I'm going to have to change that file path here. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes, and it's saving. So now if I go down to where that image is, I'm going to have this big long file path, and that's because it actually has to go to the very root of my hard drive. It's going to be a little different on Windows, but it's inside of Mac, it's inside of users, screencast is the name of the user for this account, then documents, JTuts, lessons, Dreamweaver, and then sketch. And that's no good. That's no good. So what I want to do is relocate this image. And actually I'm just going to create a copy of it. And in Mac you can just hold Option, click and drag. Now I have Sketch in the same folder as our new file. So if I click on this, you'll notice down here it's organized my files as well. So there are the sketches, but actually it's still pulling the old location for that. So what I'm going to do is actually delete all this stuff. And look, it still shows up, and that's because these are in the same folders. Now again, I'm going to demonstrate what happens when we move a file. So I'm going to go back here. Let's say I have a folder called images. If I take this image and I throw that in here, now check it out. Here I get a broken image icon because this file, so this file we're working on right here is this file right here. If it were to look in the same folder for a file called sketch.jpg, it can't be found. So that's why we're getting this broken image. So what I have to do is I have to tell it, well, hey, it's actually inside of a folder called images, which is right here. Inside of there, you'll see that we have sketch.jpg. So if I type images/sketch.jpg, now it's able to find it because it knows to look inside that folder. Now, what if I actually change the name of this folder to just img, which is often used? I haven't moved the file, but I've renamed the folder that's inside of. If I click here, actually, there it goes. Now it's broken again because it's saying, well, I'm looking for a folder called images. It doesn't exist, so I can't find sketch. So I have to go here, update that to img/sketch, and now I can find it. Okay, so I have a lot of students that have problems understanding that. But basically, always remember that when you're typing up a file path, it has to be in relation to wherever your file is. Okay, so if you put something in another folder, or if you put it on your thumb drive, or you save it somewhere without thinking where you're saving it, or if you're pulling files from folders that are on other parts of your hard drive and you rename things, like, it's going to cause problems. So please, please, please let this idea sink into your head about the relationship between the file path where we're pulling things from and where they actually exist on your hard drive or server. Okay, I can't stress that enough. So if that'll help, just experiment moving things around, rename things, change the file type, do whatever, and just see how it affects your code. But that is one of the most important things that you have to understand when dealing with web code. So anyway, those are the main things I want to point out during this lesson. And in the next lesson, I'm going to take our Photoshop layout that we sliced up, and we're going to use Dreamweaver to kind of tweak it and to make it a little bit more useful. So hope you enjoyed the lesson.